Welcome to the Changemakers Podcast, produced by City Current and powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are leading by example, fueling positive change and making a difference so we can learn and do the same.
We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose.
Now here's your host, Jeremy Park.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the Changemakers Podcast. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.
Welcome to the Changemakers Podcast, produced by City Current and powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. On this episode, we're talking about entrepreneurship, commercial real estate, podcasting, and so much more. We're honored to have with us Chris Powers. He's the founder and executive chairman of Fort Capital, and he's the host of the Fort Podcast. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's always fun to interview someone who has their own podcast. So it's like, in this case, you get to just answer the questions versus ask them.
Literally right before this was actually doing a podcast. So it's nice to be a role reversal.
There you go. Yeah, we'll try to make it easy for you. But the fun of this one is it's a personal journey. And so let's start with where you grew up. Give us a little bit about where you grew up in your hometown.
Yep, I grew up on the border in El Paso, Texas. My mom's family has been there for multiple generations. My dad had moved there to become a lawyer later in his career, but I was born there, lived there for 7 years. Then we moved to Lubbock for 4 years, and then we moved back to El Paso, where I was there till high school, and then I moved to Fort Worth in 2004.
So when you think back El Paso and Lubbock too, I played a lot of tennis in those cities. Give us a couple of favorite either traditions or experiences growing up. What were the things you like to do with your family?
Yeah, so born and raised to a great set of folks. Super grateful to have great parents. I have one sister. Growing up in El Paso, the thing I loved the most about El Paso is especially at the time we grew up, El Paso's changed a lot. There wasn't a lot to do in general. And so you just spent time with people a lot. Like it was I can't really describe it. It was some of the best relationships I've ever had. It's a very easygoing city. Because there's so little going on, you just make great friends. And that's like what you do all the time is hang out with your friends. I think when you get into bigger cities, there's more going on, there's more distraction. And so that's something I always tell people is just some of the relationships I built in El Paso were incredible. And I loved it. Lubbock, I did a short stint there from when I was 7 till I was 11. And all I really remember there was sports, the intensity of like select baseball and football at even a young age. It was just sports. And I loved it. My dad had decided to go to medical school in a career change in his late 30s. And that's what brought us to Lubbock. And so I loved both places, but that's kind of what comes to mind.
Close with your sister, or what was that like growing up?
She's 3.5 years younger. And we are extremely close now. I think growing up, we were close, but not as close as we are now. Again, 4-year separation. She was my little sister, didn't have a ton in common at that time, but we were always close just because we were brother and sister. But our relationship really blossomed, I'd call it later in life. And now we're very, very close.
That's awesome. So was there always a love for real estate, or was it more of just being an entrepreneur? Where did that start to come in?
Yeah, it's a good question. A few of the people I admired growing up were in real estate. And so I equated pretty quickly success with real estate. But I would be lying if I said I had this grand vision to be in real estate. What really happened was, I think it's more of an entrepreneurial story. I went to TCU and really just needed to make money. And I wanted to make more money than just some hourly job. And so I was fortunate. And I think my whole life is characterized by the help of other people and a lot of great folks that were willing to just kind of help me along the way. And if I took you through all 37 years of my life, there's just critical person after critical person. And so this was a critical person, was a freshman. He had just won Entrepreneur of the Year, and his name's Adam Blake. And basically, he had done it by buying rental houses. And I was so fascinated that a young kid could buy rental houses. And so I do what I think has always kind of come natural to me is if somebody's kind of doing something I find interesting or they've already walked the walk, I just go ask them how they did it. And I went and asked him how he was buying rental houses, and he taught me. And I was off to the races. I bought a rental house the end of my freshman year and just kind of kept at it. And, we can talk about how my career has unfolded, but I just kind of started, and 20 years later, I'm still buying real estate.
What was your major at TCU? What was your focus going in?
At first, it was finance only. And then I took a class by two teachers, John Thompson and Bob Aiken, who are no longer teaching at the university, but they were marketing professors. And they kind of changed my view forever. And really, I loved marketing. And so I added marketing as a major, and they would just say, like, you don't need finance or accounting people unless you can kind of market or sell yourself. And so it was something natural to me. I loved it. And so I picked that up as a second major, and it gave me an excuse to graduate a semester late, which was also helpful. I graduated high school in 3 years, but I did college in 4.5 years.
Well, so you got your first rental property though as a freshman. So at what point do you say, okay, I want to start scaling this? Because obviously you start on the residential side, but now you're into multifamily, but industrial. So you've really, scaled when you talk about Fort Capital, but go ahead and talk about, building it out.
Yeah. So, again, there was never a master plan. So I bought one. And then at the time, again, this was 04, 05 era. This was before the great financial crisis. And it was very easy to get loans, and you could get high leverage loans, and you could refinance and pull out cash. And so basically I bought one and I rented it, and then I bought a second one. So I bought it, the first deal, with 3% down, 6% cash back at closing, walked away from the closing table with money, got it leased up, refinanced it, pulled out even more money. I was like, man, I'm rich. And really what I had was a piece of real estate with a lot of debt on it. But I was kind of off to the races. And then I started realizing, as I was starting to lease my own house, there was a big need for a company to help students lease property, which this was pre-Facebook. This was pre-social media. Even in 04, people were driving around, and you'd find a sign and you'd call on it. You'd talk to the landlord. You'd meet him in the front yard the next day, sign a lease, and that's how it was done. And one thing I noticed throughout all that is, like, there was a huge inefficiency in what things were renting for, because there was no marketplace online yet. People didn't go to the internet yet. And so one house might be leasing for $1,500 and one might be $2,000. And the only reason why one was leasing for $1,500 is because they were out of state and didn't know the market. So I had this brilliant leasing idea of, I'm going to go around, create a website, get all the people around TCU to list their homes on my site, and it'll be free. And the only way I'll make money is if I can lease their property for them for more than they were currently getting. And so that started the leasing business. I began to learn market knowledge. That then turned into people asking me if I could manage their properties for them. And so then a property management business. And again, all the while, there was never this plan to build this real estate company. It was just kind of the next step. It was making good money. And then I always assumed, I'm going to go to probably Wall Street and do investment banking or something of that nature. And then I graduated in 08 at the pit of the financial crisis. So the good news was I had great property around a Texas university that was growing. And so, I think I owned 12 units at the time, so not a ton of exposure. But the investment banking jobs were all dried up. And I kind of realized, okay, I had this business. And people are like, didn't you know that was like, how are you going to go do investment banking if you had all this stuff? And the truth is, I just wasn't thinking that far ahead at the time. I just kind of figured, if I move, I'll figure out how to transition out of this. But anyway, that wasn't the case. Right before the financial crisis, I secured a line of credit with Wells Fargo that was a revolver. and everything crashed. And I basically used that to go start buying foreclosed properties in South Fort Worth, and flipping them. And I started learning how to flip. And from there, I met a guy that taught me how to build. And I mean, the story goes on, but you kind of asked me like when I decided to scale. I think the first part of my career, I never thought of it as scaling. I just kind of thought of it as the next deal, get bigger. I started paying attention to, okay, if this really is going to be a company, what does it need to look like and what kind of people need to be here? And then I met my partner, my current partner in 2014. And that was when we really started thinking about true scale. Like, okay, we had kind of I had built kind of a foundation, had built a reputation, was able to raise money, had a great track record of making other people money. And when he came along, it really became, okay, how do we take this thing and really turn it into something that is scalable, has enterprise value? People could see themselves working here for 20, 30 years. And that's when we kind of went out of this jack of all trades kind of deal shop is what I would call it, to a true business that, instead of me doing all the deals, creating a business that could do lots of deals without me having to do it all. And that probably started in 14 and 15. And really the thought there was Jason was incredible at building the company. And all companies look the same. They all have I call it the chicken of business. You got accounting and HR and finance, and everybody's got it. But then I would focus on capital raising and probably like marketing and attention and deal flow. And the other thing is that we would focus on one thing. So up to that date, we were doing lots of different types of deals, land deals, townhome deals, multifamily. We were just scattered, and we really made a decision. No, we're going to focus on one thing. We read a book by Jim Collins, Good to Great, which forever changed the trajectory of our business career. Some people will listen to this and say, like, that book's not that great. And my answer is like, you didn't understand what he was saying then, because the lessons in there are so pivotal. But we said, let's go all in on one thing and figure out what it's like to be excellent at one thing. And that was industrial. And we made that decision in late 2015, early 2016, went all in on one asset type, one business model. And that's what we've been doing the last 8 years. And today we have a credible team in 4 offices across Texas. We own in 3 states across the country. And we own, a little under 8 million square feet of industrial across major markets throughout the Southeast.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back to quite a few things. One is describing the company, talking about your team and the culture, which I think is really important in this. How you do the deals is another thing that's very creative. But take us back to the early years, because one of the things, you being the podcast host, I was watching some of the podcasts last night, and I was telling you before you record, I was watching your episode with Rusty Reed from Higginbotham, and you made a comment that early on you had Grasshopper, and I'll let you kind of share the story, but I thought it was really clever when you talk about kind of the early years being an entrepreneur, and from a marketing standpoint, right? Like making yourself look credible. What was 1 or 2 things, and talk about Grasshopper, but like that really were creative when you look back and kind of gave you a leg up to create these opportunities? So talk about Grasshopper, and then give us one of the things you think creatively you did in the early years.
So I'll start by saying, I think anybody that's never started a business, they can tend to think it's this like really polished, formalized thing. You go to business school and like, this is how you do business. And the answer is like, that could not be further from the truth. It's a dogfight, and you're just kind of figuring it out. And it's like, you've seen those pictures of Jeff Bezos. Like early on, he's like sitting at a desk made of plywood, and he's on his knees with knee pads packing boxes. And now the Amazon, like the early days of the company are also the most fun, because it's just like you're getting up every day going to war. You don't know what it's going to look like, but you're just grinding. And so how Grasshopper plays into that is, I was like, well, how can I appear to be a bigger company than we are? Because like with any company, when you call them, you kind of want to know they're credible. But if you don't have any credibility, you got to find it somewhere. And so Grasshopper was this service that you could tie to your cell phone. And basically it allows you, like if you were to call me, it'd be like, you'd reach an answering machine. It'd be like, for 1, press acquisitions, for 2, press accounting, for 3, press whatever, finance. Well, all those numbers led to me because it was a one-person company. But when you dialed, you thought, oh, this is a great company with 10 departments. And, it's kind of like the fake it till you make it. And I think every entrepreneur story has something scrappy about it in the beginning, is like, you couldn't do this forever. But the other part is, the good thing about a startup is a lot of people give you a lot of grace and a lot of wiggle room because they know you're grinding. And I remember people telling me early on, take advantage of the early years, because once you become more successful, people's willingness to let you be super scrappy and like that goes away. You don't have the excuse anymore. And it's so true. Today we could never get away with some of the things we could get away with early on, because people, maybe they don't feel sorry for you, but they've got empathy. It's like, oh, it's a startup, they're trying to make it. And anyway, Grasshopper is what we used. And I still to this day, I'm like, there's multiple people that when they would call, they'd be like, I had no idea you were this big of a company. Like,
Did you ever like put on like your acting hat and change your voice and say you're a different name?
No, I didn't, but I probably should have. But it would come through on your phone. You would see it as like, at the time it was called Powers and Company. That's the other part. I had a few employees, but Powers and Company, you would have thought this huge company. It was like me and two other people. But it would say like PNC Accounting. It's like, okay, I knew somebody was calling about accounting. But it's just a funny story.
Give us one other thing you think, just creatively, when you look back at the early years, like just fun memories like that, or something creative that you did, a campaign or something that stands out.
That's a good question. I wouldn't say it was like, okay, it's how we built our business. And I think the DNA of this still exists in our company today, albeit we're going after bigger projects, but I still think the same formula exists today. I think it actually exists more today than ever. We were buying real estate, and the way we would do it is we would literally go walk the streets and knock on people's door and just point blank ask them on their front doorstep, are you interested in selling your property or your building? And those were some of it teaches you sales, it teaches you rejection, it teaches you all this stuff. But I still think when you get in front of somebody and you can build rapport in a relationship, your odds of success go up a ton. I think in today's world with texting, and there's so many ways to communicate with somebody without having to actually get in front of them, that a lot of today's generation defaults to like, how can I do the least amount to get the most impact? And what I would say is some of the best things we did early on was we built the company culture of like, no, we're going to get in front of people. And early on that looked like, most people are at work during the day and we were trying to buy houses. So at 5 o'clock is when our work day would start to some degree. And 5 o'clock, people were getting home. We were on the streets and we'd knock on doors till dark. And, obviously, I don't do that as much anymore, but I remember the early days, like that's what some of the most success we had. And anybody listening to this, whether it's buying houses or just trying to get business from people, showing up in person, I still think is one of the most effective ways. It's not as scalable, but I think the success per attempt is much higher.
Yeah, and it just shows the work ethic and, like you're saying, the fact of the credibility, building the relationships in person, the communication, all of that playing a role. But I think, 80% of success is showing up, right? And being there present and knocking on the door physically and not being afraid to go after your dream and make it happen. And I think making it happen, the initiative is a big piece of that. So talk about Fort Capital, because obviously we've been talking about the transition from the rental homes to the multifamily to now industrial. But when you talk about Fort Capital, how do you describe the company?
So we're we're Texas based. So we have offices in Fort Worth, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. We're a vertically integrated company that acquires and owns Class B industrial across the Southeast United States. We syndicate each deal. So we've raised over $500 million of equity, and we will find a deal. We'll syndicate the capital. We'll buy it. We've acquired over 12 million feet of industrial over the last 8 years. We currently own a little bit less than 8. We also have a third-party management and leasing business that we've started to service not only our properties, but now we're starting to service other folks. And the company will continue to scale as we acquire more property. There's adjacent businesses that are natural for us to start, which we've seen over the last 3 years. And our mission at the company is to be the best real estate operator in the world. And so again, a lot of people in our industry are focused on doing deals, and obviously you got to do deals to do well, but getting something bought is like 1/20th of the battle. Then you got to operate that thing for years. And especially in the environment we're in today, where interest rates are up and it's inflation's going up and expenses are higher, being able to really operate these properties and get every last penny out of these deals is critically important, and it's going to become more important. When interest rates were 0%, there was just a lot of flexibility in the market to not have to operate well. And so I won't get too much into it on this podcast, but we've also spent 7 years building a software that runs our business called FOS, which we think is industry leading, Ford operating system. But it just ties back to our DNA, which is we want to be the best real estate operator in the world. We think we've created an incredible culture, amazing team. The cool part about being a company that's kind of maturing is we now have people on the team that have been here 7, 8 years. They've really embedded themselves into our culture, that we wouldn't be where we are without them. And it's just a fun time in the company because we're really not a startup anymore. Now we've got a little bit more levers and ability to kind of be the company we want to be without feeling like every day could be our last day.
Talk about the transition on your end when you have team members in multiple offices, multiple regions, going from controlling to then really delegating. And how has that process been for you in terms of empowering your team, but giving them the support and the reins to say, okay, now this is way bigger than a few individuals. Now we're a very large entity. Talk about kind of that growth on your end and the delegation to empower the team to build that culture, because the culture really starts at the ground up.
Yeah. So my partner runs the company day to day. He's a CEO. Like I've said from the beginning, he's an incredible operator. We just said, as far as culture, like we would want to build a company that we would want to work at. And I think that's easier said than done. I think everybody says that, but you've seen some company cultures and it's a total disaster. One of our core values is accountability. So we're looking for people that'll take accountability for the work that they do. They'll take accountability for the people that they manage. Maybe they're not managing anybody, but they just have a specific assignment. You want to find people that have accountability, and you want to build a culture that people like each other and trust each other. And so I probably can't give the best answer of how he's architected the company across multiple offices. Jason could answer that better, but I could just say your culture is kind of what you're willing to accept. That a culture is not like the top part of your company. It's what are you willing to let get by at maybe not the bottom or whatever. Because humans naturally will gravitate towards what they can get away with. And so if you're letting a certain person or team consistently underperform, then it becomes known across the company, oh, this is the level that they're willing to tolerate. And so a strong culture immediately repels people that aren't going to meet your standard. And so we have a high bar, but we think a high bar, people were designed to do great work. I think it's designed for people to kind of struggle a little bit, and that's how they learn and they grow. We create an environment of entrepreneurship in any type of role. And when you do that and you put leaders in place that people trust, and you give people a clear vision, a clear set of goals, and you hold them accountable to them, it's easier to start scaling. To the leader that wants to control it all and run the company with a closed fist, the company is just kind of at the mercy of how the founder or the owner is feeling that day. My friend Brent says small businesses don't stay small on purpose. A lot of the reasons why businesses that are small in an industry where there's proven giants is because the founder can never get out. They want to control it all, and one person can only control so much. And so, if the idea is I want to be a single person that's the best at every function in the company, well, you'll be small. If the idea is I want to hire people to where I'm the dumbest person in the room, or I'm the least competent in any one vertical, that's a change. And some of that comes through wisdom, maturity. Some of it's just how people are wired. But I don't know. It's always come natural to us to delegate responsibility. But we also hold people to really high standards, and we've built a culture that really won't accept anything less.
What is a goal? I know for Rusty, with Higginbotham, it's building to 1 billion, right? Like it's an inspirational goal, like you're talking about. So inspire the hard work and the effort and the chemistry and the teamwork. So what's one of your goals with Fort Capital?
Well, our main goal is to be the best real estate operator in the world. Some people would say, like, how do you define that? And the answer is, as long as the culture wakes up every day looking to solve problems and get better, to where it's not, I don't have to tell the team we need to get better. People just know to always be thinking, how do we make this place better? You're on your way there. So that's maybe a more loosely defined goal, but it's at the center of our flywheel. We are very, I mean, if you're at Fort Capital, you know that's what the goal is. Now, how do we get there? I think our next goal, we've surpassed 1 billion, is probably to become a $5 billion company if you're looking at a pure numeric basis. And for us, like I said, when I said we're in kind of control of our destiny, is like we have a reputation. We know we can raise the capital. It's really just a matter of time before we get there and not making any big, risky, stupid decisions along the way that could put the company in jeopardy. And so we don't have to risk the farm to get there. We just have to steadily plot, and there will be times that we'll get there quicker, and there will be times where there's a slow season. We're in a slow season right now. We haven't bought hardly anything the last 2 years, but the market hasn't bared that.
When you look at the real estate industry, commercial real estate industry as a whole, obviously, as you touched on, the market, inflation, what are one or two trends, and they can be challenges or opportunities, but what are one or two that really have your attention right now?
Interest rates for certain. You have to be good at real estate to be good at real estate, but interest rates are a big part of it, and you can't control that. And so we've just seen the largest interest rate increase of pretty much this generation. I mean, it's been a long time since they rose this fast, this quick. And in a lot of cases, it's a math equation. So that's one. I mean, you kind of said them, inflation. I think the lack of qualified labor. And so, especially in the blue collar world, a lot of the inflation is like nobody wants to be a plumber anymore. So the joke right now is like, what does a plumber charge? Whatever they want. I mean, things that used to be like, hey, I'll show up and repair this for $50. It's like hundreds of dollars now. And so what you see in the country right now on the blue collar side, the construction side, on the service side, is we've kind of raised an entitled nation of the young folks don't want to do hard service work anymore. There's been generations now of people all these folks are retiring that have done it forever, and you're not seeing a new generation get into it. So the work is often not as there's less quality in the work, and they're charging more. So it's like you're getting hit both ways. And so we think about that a lot. Immigration can solve that problem up to a certain degree, but just the spirit of wanting to be good at blue collar labor is something I think about a lot. And, it exists in Western culture more than most. You go to a lot of other countries around the world, and working with your hands and blue collar labor is like a badge of honor. Somewhere along the way in America, we kind of said, white collar office jobs are what we aspire to, and blue collar, we don't. You got to go to college, don't go to trade school. And now I think we'll learn from those lessons, but you ask what keeps me up a little bit is I think we have a labor issue that's will continue to exasperate over time. I mean, you're in the insurance business right now. That's another thing we can't control, but the cost of insurance has gone through the absolute roof. A lot's behind that. One, the cost to build anything or fix anything has gone up dramatically. The amount of legal litigious action that's taken place in America's society, where lawyers sue each other for sport to try and get the biggest purses possible, are huge. I think you solve that by saying, look, you can sue for as much, but there's a cap on how much you could win in any one case would help. Now you got me going down a rabbit hole. But anyway, insurance is super expensive. I can't control it. So we're working on self-insuring. We're working on captives. We're working on all these things. But it's just coming at you from every angle right now, which gets back to the root of the people that make it through this are true operators and not just people that bought something, kind of fumbled around with it, tried to operate it, and sold it for a higher price. Those days are over.
Let's switch gears. What inspired you to launch the podcast?
I don't have a great answer for this. I love talking to people. I'm very inquisitive. I love learning. I always felt like I was the person that would go have a conversation with you, Jeremy, and then I would go like tell somebody about it. So I was like, I'm just going to record 10 of these. This was in 2018. I literally said, I'm going to do 10 and then I'm going to stop, or I'm going to do 10 and we'll see what happens. And 6 years later, I've kept doing it. It's just a labor of love. It's been a huge blessing. I've met a ton of people. I've built a lot of relationships. I've learned a lot. For the guest, it provides a great platform for them to win and get exposed to the world. It's helped our business. We've raised money and met people we would have never met. And so it's just a win all around. I win in several categories. And so that's kept it going. And it's just been a lot of fun. And in today's world, the ability to talk kind of directly to your audience and not filtered through some other medium, I think is super important. And will continue to be more important in a noisy world where you kind of want to control the narrative.
Yeah, you're pushing close to like 350, if not above. So when you talk about number of episodes, like, yeah, you've had a lot of conversations.
I have.
It's around entrepreneurialism, the entrepreneurial journey. You do a great job as a host. Big fan of what you're doing there.
Thanks.
Obviously you can't pick favorites. It's like trying to pick your favorite kid, but give us one or two. You can choose Rusty, but you don't have to since I've already mentioned him. But who are some that really pop into your head for surprises? So in other words, ones that you either knew their story, but you learned a lot of new things that you didn't know before, or you didn't really know their story. You bring them on and you're like, wow, that's amazing. So who are a couple that stand out to you when you look back?
Yeah, I'll give you three that come to mind. These are not my favorite three, but they were three really great ones. Had a guy on last week, Don Tetman. He's an anonymous account on Twitter. He just revealed who he actually is. He goes by the name Strip Mall Guy. And he's built like 250,000 followers on Twitter, all talking about owning and operating retail strip malls. And so he's got a unique story because he's obsessed about what he does. Nobody loves strip malls more than this guy. He was anonymous for a long time to where people thought, is this guy even real? He's so knowledgeable, but he won't identify himself. And then he kind of came out and showed the world. And so that was an interesting one. I've done Barry Sternlicht, who's probably the top of the real estate world in America. I mean, he's real estate royalty, and he was gracious enough to tell me some stories he's never told publicly, which make for great episodes. And then totally flipping, I had a guy named Jamie Winship on that was an undercover, or not, I'm sorry, he was in the CIA. He lived over in the Middle East for 25 years, converting terrorists to Christianity and disbanding some of the worst terrorist cells in the world. Wrote a book called Living Fearless. I read it. I loved it. He talks about how humans have this huge identity issue and that the reason that we have problems in the world is because we keep separating ourselves and putting ourselves into tribes. And the more we divide ourselves, the more conflict we have. And anyway, he was an incredible episode, a lot of fun to do. He was an author, totally not real estate related. And it's the second most listened to episode that I've ever done. It's been listened to over 100,000 times. It's awesome.
Obviously, with each one, you learn, right? Like you learn their story, but you have stuff that you take with you and internalize. Give me maybe one example of something that you learned from a guest that you've been able to apply either to your own personal development, professional development, or to the company. So what's something that you kind of took from a guest? You said, wow, that's something I actually need to apply.
I don't think it's just one guest. I think it's the people that are the most successful long-term. There are probably two things, but maybe the one that stands out the most to me that I have had to teach myself, I'm a go-getter. I kind of they listen really, really well. And you can get really excited in business or really in anything where somebody's speaking, and as they're speaking, you're already kind of formulating what you're going to say back, and you kind of miss the whole message. And not just what they're saying with their words, but their mannerisms. You're missing a moment. And so I would say that some of the people that I admire the most, listening is a key characteristic. And on the flip side of that, I haven't met anybody yet that's ever, and I've had billionaires on, I've never met anybody yet that said money satisfied what I was after. So most people, what satisfies them is the journey. is going through the work, is doing the thing. It's not making the pile of money, which America glamorizes pretty heavily. In fact, I've met a lot of people that have gotten to a point in their career where they made a lot of money. Maybe they sold their company, and you can see it really quickly that maybe they celebrated for a little bit, but once they were off the journey, they were kind of scrambling and kind of lost. And so, yeah, I think if there's anything I've learned having interviewed all these people is like money helps up to a certain point, and then it's a law of diminishing returns.
It's interesting as you say that. One of the guys who is a mentor to me, he always says his greatest fear is to be irrelevant, because as a CEO, you are involved in so many things. You're engaged, you're invited out to all the events, and you're plugged in. And then all of a sudden, as you step away, all of a sudden you're not invited. You don't have a seat at the table. You're not, able to step in and get the adrenaline rush of solving problems and being, and so just to your point, it's not about the money. It's about the purpose and the connectedness and the people, the relationships that you build, which make everything you do special, right? Like that's when you think about your team and what you're building at Fort Capital and your ability to interview everyone with the Fort podcast. It's about the relationships ultimately that you're creating as a part of that. And so carry that into the relationships in the community. Talk about community engagement, philanthropy, nonprofits, giving back. How does that play in?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what you said just now of common threads, the people that actually have the most joy in what they're doing that I found, not just through the podcast, but just in general, are doing things for other people. And I think some of that is like they're born that way. They're just born givers. Some people, it's a learned skill a little bit. High achievers, it's usually a me thing. And then I'd call it that second mountain or that second twist on life is it becomes a we thing. But giving back, whether it's to your community, giving time, giving money, that is ultimately what I have found brings the most joy. And so how do we do that? As a company, we rally behind one of the children's hospitals here, Cook's Children. As a family, my wife and I give, to local things. We enjoy giving anonymously to folks that have real needs that need to be fixed right now. That's probably where I get the most joy. And then even with the podcast, like I put a lot of time into it. I'm not asking anybody for anything. It's a give back. It's the education I wish I had. And I just think it's everybody said, to which much has been given, much is deserved. And I feel like I've been given a great opportunity in this world. And I feel a huge responsibility to pay it forward kind of as we move forward. And I'm not the most generous person, but I think my goal one day when it's all said and done is that might be a way that people would describe me. And I think I'm learning that's a phase of my life that I'm entering, and it's something I'm excited about.
Who do you turn to? Obviously, as you've alluded to, you've had many mentors along the way and people who played a pivotal role in your success. When you look at where you are right now, who do you turn to for inspiration, for advice when you're going through a challenge?
I won't give you the preloaded answer. We don't have to go down there, but honestly, for me, it's my faith. That's where I lean on the most is Jesus Christ. That's where my day starts and ends. That's the true word in my life. And really from there, it's people that believe the same, people that are following that path in life too. So I have 4 or 5 men in my life. Again, my life is characterized by people that just haven't given up on me. I lost my father 12 years ago, but like I said, I was super lucky to have an incredible father that even though I haven't been with him for 12 years, the best gift he left me is I know 12 years later exactly what he would tell me to do. There's no gray area, which is a huge blessing. There's a gentleman in town named Pete Chambers. I'm sure your father knows him. He's a great, great man. And he has kind of walked with me the last 12 years. And, a lot of those years I wasn't listening to great wisdom. I was I was being told, but I wasn't listening, and he never gave up on me. He really supported me in times where things have been tough, both in business and personally, but he's always kind of pointed me back to the word and just kind of kept me on a path. And there's a series of men that are very much like that, but you hear often you're an average of the 5 people you surround yourself with, and that's not a cliche. That's a real thing, and it's made all the difference in my life.
Give me one special memory, and it can be from childhood. It can be, more recent, but obviously, you mentioned losing your father 12 years ago, but a memory with your father that stands out. And then you also mentioned, you hear his voice, what your father would say. What's some advice that when you think about it, it makes you smile? Because, it's like, this is my dad talking.
Yeah. I will say there's a story, and I've told it on my podcast, and I actually sent a photo of this. But if you walked into my office, there's an email on the wall that I printed out. But it's the last email he ever sent me 3 days before he passed away. And I won't read the whole email, but essentially I was in a situation where I was trying to get a loan from a bank. And basically, if I had a larger cash reserve, they would lower my interest rate. But I didn't have the cash reserve. My dad didn't have the cash to give me, but the banker was like, hey, if your dad will lend you cash for a few days and you can take a snapshot of your bank account with that cash in it, it'll pass. Then you send your dad the money back and you're all good. And everybody does it. It's not quite how it's designed, but everybody does it. And my dad basically just sent me this email that was like, there's nothing on the planet I wouldn't do for you as my son. And I hope you're not upset with me, but I'm not going to do this for you. The world is shifting with people whose moral compass is changing, and they'll do what they can do to get by because everybody does it. And he basically just taught me this lesson in an email, which was like, just because the whole world does it doesn't mean you should. And in fact, the world needs more people that won't do that. And so, although I hope you're not disappointed in me, I hope you did the right thing and you could be proud of that. And it's this awesome email. I have it printed out, but that will probably, I think the lesson there is, one, it was just an incredible lesson. As a parent, you never know what's going to land with your kids. It's like, I've probably done a lot of good things for my kids, and there's things I wish I had never done. I don't know what's going to stick. You never know till later in life. And he probably didn't think that email might be the first thing I think about for the rest of my life when I think about him. But it was so impactful. I have it up on my wall. It was a great lesson, and I read it probably once a week while I'm in the office. So that's one thing. The second was just really 2 things. He was honesty was his most critical. There was no value that he was willing to break if it wasn't honest. And then the second was, he never pushed me hard to be great at anything, but he always had my back. So I never believed for a second that anybody believed in me more than my dad. And that's a very powerful way to walk through life. 1, having a good dad, and 2, one that believes in you and isn't pushing you to be better at something so that he felt validated.
That's awesome. And it's interesting too, just as a father, as you're talking to your kids, we've got 2 boys, and it's like, to your point, you don't know what sticks. Like, you say things just in a moment, and yet they'll recite it back years later as something that really made an impression. And you're like, I said that? Like that? Yeah. Well, okay. But, you say a thing in a moment, in a situation, but how they internalize that. And so last question, then we'll switch over to a lightning round. We've talked about your father. Give us one special memory with your mother.
My mother, so my dad was in medical school and in residency. He wasn't around a ton at that time. That's pretty demanding. So my mom and we hung out a lot. I just think the memory of my mother is the ultimate sacrifice that she was willing to make and put others forward. So my dad was a lawyer, came home at 37 and said, hey, I'm going to go to medical school. So total career change, total life change. You go from making a lawyer's partner salary to making $0 as a medical student. And then she was just always there for us. And so I just think the general theme I think about my mom is, she was willing to put my dad first, us first. She was just always willing to put us first. And As I think about that today, is like, it's now that I'm actually 37 this year. I think, man, it never sounded as crazy until now, and the thought of doing that is so drastic, and the amount of love you'd have to have for your family to go through it, that's huge. So that's probably what I think about when I think about my mom.
What's cool though is that in both of those instances, you see the soul for you and your family, on that side and the faith, but also too how you've built Fort Capital with your team and trust, integrity, being there, supportive, like all of those things. When you look back at your journey, your personal journey, they carry with you with who you are, and you carry them into the office and you carry them into your journey professionally. I think that's what's cool is when you look back at so many things, once again, just kind of like the father advice, you go through life, you don't really think back, and then all of a sudden you get older and you start looking back, and it's like, oh wow, all these moments shaped who I am today. They shape how I think, they shape how I behave, and they shape how we build our company and try to make a real difference with our family and with our company and give back and make the world better. So I think all of it is kind of a cool chance to look back while looking ahead. So
yeah.
Let's switch over and do a fun lightning round as we wrap up. Short questions, short answers. What do you like to do to relax?
Golf.
So when friends come and visit from out of town, where do you like to take them?
Either Joe T's or H3 Ranch. Those are restaurants.
Yeah. Oh, Joe T's.
Yeah.
That's a go-to spot for sure. When you are going on vacation, where do you and your family like to go on vacation?
Vail.
What's a favorite or fun date night for you and your wife?
Going on like a walk for like an hour, coming home, and then we'll go to this little Italian restaurant called Bella Italia at Merrick and Camp Bowie. It's a quaint little Italian restaurant. We love it.
When you say golf, where's one of your favorite courses outside of DFW?
Okay, you got good questions. I could use, it's cliche, but it's probably the most Pebble Beach is pretty freaking unbelievable. I've played a lot of great courses, but I've played Pebble a few times and it's pretty spectacular. It's hard to beat.
All right. So when friends come to play golf in DFW area, where do you like to take them?
Shady Oaks Country Club.
All right. There you go. Nice. What sort of brand do you like? What are your golf clubs? Are they a multitude of different ones, or do you stick with one?
It's a multitude. I went to a fitting. I've got King Cobra irons, which I've never played King Cobra before until recently. And then I've got Titleist woods and a tailor-made putter. And I've got artisan wedges, which are custom wedges made out west.
Are you, so these are all like, tennis related on the equipment, but it applies to golf too. Do you prefer to wear one brand of clothing? So the shirt and the shorts or pants have to match with the shoes, or is
No.
anything goes?
Anything goes.
Okay. Yeah. See, all right. Are you more productive in the morning or in the evening?
Morning.
What's a recent book you've read?
What's a recent book I've read? I just finished, by Rick Rubin, Creative. I'm missing the title. It's a book by Rick Rubin. I'm totally botching it.
That's all right. It gives people something to go and Google, right?
Yeah.
It gives them some homework. What's a favorite TV show or a fun TV show or movie you've watched recently?
There's a show on Netflix. Well, one, that roast of Tom Brady was pretty unbelievable. If you haven't watched it yet, it's awesome. I think we need more roasts in the world to kind of bring back comedy and some lightheartedness. It was really funny. There's a one I'm watching right now called Unlocked, but it's basically a Netflix documentary on. It's an experiment. It's a bunch of prisoners that are usually locked down 23 hours a day and get 1 hour out. And this warden says, I'm flipping it and we're going to go to the European model. You get 24 hours a day outside of your cell. And it's watching how these folks in prison that have lived under this 23 hours locked in your cell regime, how they learn to adapt to having more freedom and accountability, trust.
Oh, see, I learned a lot as well. That's cool. But what's a quote that inspires you? And you don't have to get it verbatim, but what's a quote or a saying that inspires you?
I'll just give you a recent one that I've been thinking about. Mitch Rales that runs Danaher just said a simple line. He said, greatness takes time. And I think in today's world, you go back to like companies that were built decades ago, family businesses, they just built these incredible businesses, but they never really thought it had to be great by next year or the year after. They just built these long. Higginbotham's a perfect example. Great takes time. Higginbotham's been compounding for 20% year over year for 35 years. You could make an argument they're the best they've ever been in year 35. But if they had decided to sell out, year 10, they probably would have made a good multiple, but it wouldn't have been as great and as impactful as it has been. But there's no way that Higginbotham could have been as great as they are today 10 years into the business. It took 35 years. And so in today's world with venture and tech and all these, like, everybody thinks they can build something great in a few years and flip it or sell it or whatever. And if you just stand and look at the greatest businesses, the greatest institutions, the greatest relationships that you have in your life, they all just take time. Like, great relationships just take time to build. Your best friend in the world has probably been in your life for 25, 30 years. It just took time. And I think I have to remind myself that at times, because there's sometimes you want it now. And so the one I've been thinking about is great takes time. Yeah. Greatness takes time.
That's awesome. Give me one way your wife has made you better.
Oh man, there's a lot of ways. My wife cares a ton about two things. One, she's a wizard. So if we need to get something done at the household, like, it will get done way better than I ever believed it could get done, as long as I clearly communicate to her, this is the family plan. She's just awesome in that regard. And the second is she's an incredible host. So she loves to have a good time. And if she's going to serve you, you are going to feel like you were seen and you were served well. And if you come to our house, like, you will feel her hospitality. I'm not near as good at that, but if you ever wanted somebody to host something, you would hire my wife and she would make sure it was very special.
Give me one nonprofit experience, volunteer experience, working within different organization that warms your heart.
There's been a few. I mean, I think I just kind of said this. So most people don't even know this about their local churches, but at your church, a lot of times members of the congregation will call in that have real needs. Like, I need my mortgage paid. I need my electric bill paid. My kid has a medical bill that I can't pay. Like, real life, I need this done ASAP. Some of my favorite giving is helping people out that are in a really tough situation in the moment. And you realize it humbles you. It's an easy way to realize maybe some of the issues that I think are big issues are not big issues. That's probably one of my favorite ways. Do it anonymously. Church usually has a list of needs, and there's an easy way. You don't need to have a lot of money to really change somebody's life. That's probably one. And we've done lots of volunteering at some of the inner city schools, which is interesting. But I think giving at the church has been one that's personally fulfilled me the most.
Last question is about legacy, which you've kind of already alluded to and touched on, but you're building your legacy each and every day, many, many, many years from now. What do you hope that people say about you and the difference that you made here on earth?
I hope they say that I was unbelievably generous, not just with my finances, but with my time. I think at my worst, I'm very rushed. And I can make you feel like you're not important because I'm trying to get to the next thing. And I think when I really admire people, they always make you feel kind of heard, understood, seen. They're not in a rush to move on to the next thing. So generous. And you could sum that up with, like, Chris Powers left way more on the table than he ever took. That would be a good way to end it. And that would be with my family, with my kids, with my employees, with my friends. And I would say I have work to do to earn that badge, but that's where I hope it all ends up.
Yeah, I love it. Well, last question is website, social media. Where do we go to learn more, follow your efforts? So talk about Fort Capital and then obviously the Fort podcast.
FortCapitalLP.com is our website. Yeah, FortCapitalLP.com. The Fort podcast, it's on all major podcast hosting sites. We also have a YouTube channel, or you can follow me on Twitter at Fort Worth Chris.
Makes it easy. Well, Chris Powers, thank you for all you do to power the good. You are a change maker indeed. Thank you for coming on the Change Makers podcast.
Thank you for having me. You're a great host. This was awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Changemakers Podcast, produced by City Current and powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
To learn more, to listen to past episodes, and to share your stories of other changemakers who are making a difference, visit citycurrent.com or call 901-321-1020.
Follow the conversation online using the handle @CityCurrent or the hashtag #PowerTheGood.